I've read The Boogeyman, and I would like to make an analysis and interpretation of it. And here in the beginning we have a disposition, and I would like to make a short introduction in the start, and then move on to the structure of the story. Then I'll make a characterization of Lester Billings, and in the end I'll just have a perspective to the horror genre. And in the end I have a source I'll have to show you. Yeah. The Boogeyman is written by Stephen King and is published in 1978 in the collection Night Shift. This story deals with the issue of it being supernatural or just a psychological illness by the main character. And the point of view of the story is that we have a third-person omniscient narrator. And I just have one quote to emphasize that. Dr. Harper said nothing. He thought that Billings looked haggard and old. So we actually hear the thoughts of Dr. Harper, and it's of course a third-person narrator because it says Dr. Harper and not I. And then the main characters in the story is of course Lester Billings and Dr. Harper, or the Boogeyman. Well, that depends on the interpretation. And then we have the former wife, Lester Billings' former wife, Rita, and their 3 children, Danny, Andrew, and Cheryl. And then I would like to talk about the structure of the story. And the Boogeyman is of course a short story, and it starts in medias res. We actually just thrown right into the conversation between Dr. Harper and Lester Billings. So this is a quite sudden and abrupt starting, which captures the reader right away. And the duration of the story is 1 to 2 hours in real time, but in reality we actually have a much longer time period in the story because there are so much dialogue and especially flashbacks. These flashbacks actually goes as far back as the childhood of Lester Billings, so the time period is maybe 25 years or something like that. It also widens the settings in the story because we hear about Lester Billings' 2 houses and his childhood and stuff like that. So it's not just the office, Dr. Harper's office. Yeah, and then the whole story is mainly based on dialogue between Dr. Harper and Lester Billings, and it's actually quite obvious given the fact that it is a conversation between a therapist and a client. But I think this choice of writing style, if you can call it that, gives the story another dimension, and it actually makes it more real, if you can say that, because this is actually how a conversation between a therapist and a client would look like. So yeah, it just makes it more real. And then I'll move on to the characterization of Lester Billings, and I'll just start with some basic info. Lester Billings is 28 years old, and he comes from Waterbury in Connecticut. Lester Billings is divorced, and he had 3 children, but they're all dead. And I don't think that he's that well educated. It says in the text that he was employed by an industrial firm, and later he says one of his best jobs was as a seller for a firm which sells drill bites or something like that. So yeah, we have to assume that he's middle class or lower middle class, in my opinion. Yeah, and I will just move on. And I think one of the most important things about Lester Billings is this love-hate relationship he has towards his children. And I'll just start with a quote which says, "And if he didn't stop crying, I'd give him a whack." So this gives us the assumption that he is a very strict father and quite cynical because he actually beats his own children. But on the other hand, he is a caring father at some point, especially towards Andrew. But it seems like he actually loves them all. And this is after he'd spoken about the death of Shirl, where he says his words trailed off, one single tear, very large and silent, ran down the side of his cheek. So yeah, he actually can't hide this pain the death of Shirl has caused in him, and this is the sign of love towards Shirl and also the other children, because he speaks with pain every time he speaks of the death of his children. And then I think he's a male chauvinist. And well, one quote which makes it quite obvious is this one, and why should follow her husband. But it's not just that he has a problem with women. It's like Billings thinks that reader is ignorant and just the root of all the family's problems. So he says at some point, children tie a man down, women like that, especially when the man is brighter than they. So it seems like he believes that, or Billings believes that the ultimate goal for any woman is to get a man down on his knees, and that reader has to blame for all the problems because she's a woman. Another quite important thing about Lester Billings is that Lester believes in the boogeyman, even though it is supernatural, and this belief in the boogeyman has made him paranoid and afraid. And I just got a quote from Dr. Harbour's office, where it says, "And his eyes wandered uneasily to the closet door, which was firmly shut." So this belief in the boogeyman has made Lester paranoid and very afraid. Another word I would put on Lester is egocentric, because in the end he actually sacrifices Andrew for his own good, because he believed that the boogeyman will come and get himself, and to avoid that he just chooses to sacrifice Andrew. And then I've said that I believe that Billings actually feels bad about his acts. He knows that they are wrong, but it's just like an act of panic. After the killings, he said this is after the killing of Andrew. He says, "How's that for complete cowardice?" And he was lying on the floor and staring at me, accusing me. So after the killings, he can see that his actions weren't that good, and I believe that he actually has some sort of regret towards his own actions. Yeah. And I would like to move on to a perspective to the horror genre. And well, first I would like to make it clear that I believe that the boogeyman is supernatural, and if I was to place it in the twist and horror of theories on fantastic literature, I would place it in the fantastic category. I don't believe there are so much hesitation in the story, and certainly Lester believes in the boogeyman, and I actually believe the only rational explanations which are given throughout the whole story is the one which Dr. Haber gives, but I still believe there is a hesitation, but that's not within the story, but that's outside the story. It lies by the reader. I believe, and especially when I read it, I found it quite hard to believe that it would be supernatural, especially in the start. But in the end, I think the proof of it being supernatural is so clear that we have to accept it. Yeah, if we should just make a short perspective to The Shining, I actually believe that the Boogeyman and The Shining are quite alike. In The Shining, we had this doubt about whether it was supernatural or psychological in the start, but in the end, we get this quite clear evidence with the picture that it is supernatural, and it's actually the same here, because we have this doubt about whether it's supernatural or not in the start, but in the end the Boogeyman actually stands in front of Lester, and well, I can see why some people would place it in a psychological horror and use a Freudian approach with this normality versus monster, but I believe more in the supernatural horror, as said before. Then we also have a bit of physical horror, and if I was to use Stephen King's three horror agents, we obviously have the gross out with the children's death, which are explained quite detailed afterwards. So yeah, that's a bit of gross out there. Yeah, that was actually my presentation. I just have this one source with the year in the introduction where I used Wikipedia. So yeah, that's it. Hope you enjoyed.